Welcome to the Oddity Shop, where the bizarre is always on sale.
Hey there, you little oddballs. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. This is the podcast where we talk about a lot of
odd things, creepy things, weird things. If you are into the paranormal at all, we got you, at least somewhere along the way, so stick around a while.
Yeah. I have to ask you a question.
Ooh, what do you have to ask me?
Do you think Cher's a vampire?
Cher?
Yeah.
I've literally never had that thought in my life. I feel like, though, you have something to tell me about that.
No, I just think that she's a vampire, or that she sold her soul, because how does she look the same? She's like 80 years old. She's almost 80 years old.
She has that plastic surgery money.
No, that's not plastic surgery. Look at her. She looks the same.
Okay.
She's a vampire. Okay.
Well, speaking of vampires.
Oh, I did not even plan that.
I want to tell you the story of the Blood Countess, also known as Elizabeth Bathory, which sounds a lot less exciting than the Blood Countess. So, have you ever heard of Dracula?
Are you really asking me that?
Right, because everybody's heard of the man version of Dracula, but nobody has ever heard of the Blood Countess of Hungary, who lived all up in her, I'm going to murder this because I'm not Slovakian, the Castiche castle.
How about you just call it the castle?
We're going to call it the castle. Anyways, she is rumored to be responsible for up to the death of 650 servant girls. Which almost makes me mad at the fact that, like, everyone's heard of Dracula, but nobody's heard about the real-life Blood Countess, so...
Okay, but she's killing her servant girl? Oh, you're going to tell me.
Just wait. We're going to get into all the gory details. There's kind of a lot of fogginess over what's truth, what's rumor. Some say she was just kind of a deranged killer who was obsessed with violence. But other stories are like, okay, she not only killed these people mercilessly, but she was also using their blood for all sorts of witchy rituals. Witchy rituals. That is a fun phrase to say.
Ooh, say it 10 times fast.
I will not.
Okay.
Anyways, got a lot of references for this story. I got a lot of information from biographics on YouTube. Good old Wikipedia for some fill-in details that were missing. We got Britannica.com, who had an awesome biography on her life. And then a book called the Atlas Obscura, which has been just a wealth of ideas for
Bought
this story.
it.
All right, well, whether you bought it or not, here comes her story. So, we're going way back, all right? Elizabeth is born August 7th, 1560, in Bathory, Hungary. And she's born into, like, a super rich, super powerful family. Like, there's privilege, and then there's privilege where she came from, okay?
Must be nice.
Well... Let's get through this. You might think a little differently.
Okay.
So she grows up insanely well privileged. She gets a great education. Unlike most people in Europe at this time, she gets education on different languages and how to run estates. And, she's, for all accounts, she's a pretty smart chick.
Okay, I'm sorry. What year was this again?
It's 1560.
1560, okay.
So her family actually controlled then Transylvania, which is kind of part Hungary, part Slovakia. But her uncle was the king of Poland. Like, no big deal. She's raised in her family castle. Like, she just grows up nobility, all right? But while she's smart, she's wealthy, one of the things her family couldn't buy her was good health. So from a super, super young age, Elizabeth is prone to having violent seizures, among some, like, other not so great ailments. Maybe because during this time the noble families were keeping the blood pure and marrying people to cousins, which led to,
Oh, right, because you wanted to keep the wealth and privilege in the family.
Which then you don't add a whole lot to the gene pool, hence,
Yeah.
maybe these seizures.
Let's not do that.
So 1500s, we don't have great medical care at this time, and one of the ways to cure seizures is to take the blood of healthy people and rub it on the lips of those having seizures to get these seizures to stop.
How do we determine the healthy people?
Well, the ones who aren't seizing in 1560.
Right. So
we weren't doing blood tests.
They haven't seized yet.
Right. So they must be fine.
Okay.
So anyway, this treatment kind of maybe awakens a bloodlust. We'll come back to that later. Bloodlust aside, this lady was...
Okay, how old was she when she first started getting these treatments? Do you know?
That's unclear. I mean, this is from 1560.
Yeah.
We don't have perfect records.
Okay.
But aside from the seizures and the bloodlust, Elizabeth was also very drawn into violence. So, as nobility would, there's not a lot of entertainment at this time, so she would go to public tortures. And while others are cringing, Elizabeth almost found it delightful. She apparently got a lot of joy once as a child from watching a man get literally sewn into the body of a horse as a punishment, and she was just kind of smiling.
What the hell do you have to do to get sewn into a horse? And what did that horse do?
That's kind of what I was thinking too. Like, he's just kind of the innocent victim here.
I can't even picture that. Okay.
What we know about her early life, right? Born into a powerful family, thought blood would help her health, specifically other people's blood, and
non-seizuring people's blood.
And definitely had a penchant for violence. So she's just like a totally normal little girl in the 1500s.
Okay, can I ask you a question if you know this? In that era or olden days, if you weren't healthy, wasn't it like kind of like a thing where they didn't want people to know that you had an unhealthy or sickly child? They usually like locked you away. That wasn't like in this scenario?
I think with hers where it's not really like a deformity, maybe less, but
okay.
That's just me totally guessing in all honesty.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Okay.
All right. In Elizabeth's teens, she becomes engaged to another super rich, super wealthy, powerful count whose name is Ferenc Nadasdy.
Was it her cousin?
No, this one actually was not her cousin.
Oh, impressive.
So anyway, she quickly moves into the Nadasdy's family palace and begins to learn about their estate and their affairs. So she quickly becomes invested in the family and kind of wins them over. At the age of 14 years old...
Oh my God!
Yeah, she's already engaged.
Wait. She's already been sucking blood, participating watching public tortures. Now we're married. Okay.
Not married yet. No, we're just engaged.
I'm sorry, engaged.
Okay.
All at the ripe age of 14. Got it.
So, 14 years old, the year is now 1574. Ferenc and Elizabeth decide that they're going to, actually plan their wedding. So, their wedding was going to unite two super powerful families. They almost become like the insanely popular power couple of their day.
Okay. If anybody's listening to this and you're drinking, I want you to take a shot every time Zach says nobility. Continue.
I'll find a different word. So, May 8th of 1574, the couple, they start their wedding party. And, party is a... understatement, right? So this thing is extravagant. It lasts over 3 days. 5,000 people in attendance. And at the end of it, Ferenc gifts his bride with her very own castle. The Castiche castle.
What do you need your own castle for?
Spoiler alert, torture.
Is that why he gifted it to her, though?
No, but you're the richest family in all of basically what's now Slovakia. What else are you going to give them? This castle ends up becoming a historical site, right? Kind of due to what Elizabeth and her friends get up to behind the walls. So the castle itself, if this isn't enough of a foreshadowing, it's described as peak Gothic architecture and quite bleak overall, sitting on top of a hill overlooking a small village and all of its farmland. So if you're kind of thinking dreary stone castle with not a lot of frill to it, overlooking a bunch of farms.
I mean, that's exactly what I'm thinking, but I'm also thinking that would be so peaceful if I had it.
Let me tell you, this place is anything but peaceful. Okay, so turns out, most kind of these marriages with rich, powerful families are sort of almost arranged, right? Ferenc and Elizabeth are made for each other. They are both completely obsessed with violence. They literally bond over soaking paper in oil, putting the paper between the toes of their servant girls, and then lighting them on fire.
For what reason?
The love of violence, Kara.
Okay.
I mean, these two are just, they're kind of out of their minds.
Who comes up with this stuff?
Well, Ference, because then he actually, he once gifts her a clawed glove so that she can inflict damage to the servant girls' faces.
So you're just like, so it's like a glove that just has claws on the fingertips is what I'm imagining?
Basically.
Okay.
Okay, so after a short time of them being together, you know, honeymoon stage wears off and Ference goes to war. He quickly climbs the ranks, and he's described as being absolutely brutal on the battlefield. Like, this man is revered for the fact that he just fucked people up.
Okay.
So, while the war rages on, Elizabeth actually does kind of some good, right? She cares for the family in the estates. She gives refuge to the villagers and the farm people in her castle to help them escape the violence of war.
What?
She went through a nice streak, okay. But after some time, she gives up the philanthropy and turns a little bit more dark.
So I'm just thinking that she probably was dark this whole time and she's just like collecting bodies to torture. That's what I'm thinking.
Do you feel the most powerful and beautiful with the elements of the earth around you? Do you like one-of-a-kind jewelry? Do you sometimes feel like a woodland fairy? Me too. That's why I created Holly and Hemlock, a magical shop filled with handmade wooden jewelry and metaphysical tools. Come check out our enchanting wooden wares at www.hollyhemlock.com and join us in honoring the magic and beauty of nature with each unique creation. That's www.hollyhemlock.com.
Not quite. She was actually doing good,
Okay.
and I almost think it was like, because this is early in the marriage, she's still new to the Nadasdes and taking care of their affairs. She's almost like proving herself, right?
Okay.
But then she meets Anna Delvoye.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
Okay, I had the same idea too, because you're thinking of Anna Delvey.
Oh.
Right, but no, this is Anna Delvoye. So, husband is out at war, Elizabeth meets Anna, and most people kind of think she's a witch.
Ew.
She moves into the castle with Elizabeth.
Is this like a friendship or like a romantic relationship?
No, this is just like friendship.
Okay.
Because it turns out they bond over torturing young women. Okay.
Oh.
But, so before Anna, it was really just torture, right? So, like, a little light maiming, you know, we're not kind of getting rid of our own staff. With Anna around, Elizabeth goes from simply torturing these girls for fun inside the castle to just straight up murder. So they would kill the girls, dispose of their bodies around the castle in shallow graves, many of which were just dug up by hungry dogs.
So we're not trying to hide this.
They tried, they just didn't try very hard. You have to think of it too, like, this family is so rich and powerful. I mean, her uncle is the king of Poland. They're basically untouchable.
So you don't really have to try that hard. Nothing's going to happen.
Right. And so you think that, like, killing servants would create an issue. However, with all the influence of the family and the fact that this castle is surrounded by villages and farms, there's kind of a large supply of peasants.
Well, and that's kind of what I was just going to say, is that servants around that time probably don't really have family or people like checking up on them. I mean, their whole life is dedicated to that home and who they're serving. So they don't really have anybody checking on them if they go missing.
Good point. So there are families who actually sold their children
Yes.
to become servants for Elizabeth. And peasants are pretty much seen as disposable to those in powers at this time. Anybody who would have actually done anything hardly even raised their eyebrows at the disappearances. Like, it's just kind of run-of-the-mill normal. So they had funerals for the girls, and they would just kind of say they died of diseases like cholera or other, you know, like common ailments. And the community just sort of believed it, or at least they pretended to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what else would you do?
Now I kind of want to shift and talk about some of their methods. Trigger warning for anybody, it does get a little gruesome here. Not too terrible, but she was a big fan of sewing needles, so a lot of these servant girls were fixing and mending clothes not closes.
Closes.
So they were fixing clothes, and one of their punishments, Anna and Elizabeth would take the girls and push these large sewing needles into their fingers.
Mm-mm.
Then they would tell the girls if it hurt, they could just remove them. As soon as the girls would remove the needles, then they'd cut the finger off.
Wait, so you're telling me that I just got a needle shoved into my finger. If it hurts, I can pull it out, but then my finger gets chopped off?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
But at least you wouldn't have that same torture method again. Another thing they were fond of doing would be to strip the girls naked, light them on fire, claw them, or just cut off different appendages.
Okay, this is a dumb question, but is there a reason why they're like, is it just like, hey, you, I'm going to torture you today?
It kind of just seems that way.
Okay.
But we'll get into maybe some of the why a little bit later. So some of them were fed flesh, whether it be their own or somebody else's. They would use hot irons and hold it against the women to brand and disfigure them. And the castle itself, in a very Ference and Elizabeth fashion, was outfitted with its own torture chamber, with plenty of other methods for Elizabeth and Anna to get into.
So I'm assuming that, did she have like guards or like, I mean, obviously these people couldn't run away. It was probably pretty difficult.
I imagine so. There really wasn't a whole lot on that part of it, but more friends come up later that might shed some light.
Oh, God.
So at this point, though, Elizabeth is about 44, and unfortunately, Ference dies. So the year's now 1604. He'd been ill for quite some time.
Did she poison him?
The exact death of his, or cause of death, is unknown, but ill, paralyzed, death.
Got it.
And keep the poison in your brain, because that comes back later.
Okay.
Without her counterpart, you'd think maybe Elizabeth would calm down a little bit. Nope, she actually becomes far more violent. So, without Ference now, Anna and Elizabeth decide they're going to recruit others to help. So 2 of them were actually servants in the castle. Their names are Dorca and Catelyn.
Okay, this just, I know you didn't watch The Chilling Tales of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but one of the witches in there, I think her name, oh no, it was Dorcas. Maybe that's where they got it from, because it's such an odd name, Dorca.
Anyway, so there's Dorca, there's Catelyn, and they get another young man. All would kind of help to recruit more peasants.
So were these people being tortured at one point, and they were just like, hey, do you want to like start doing the torturing, or did they never get tortured?
Once again, unclear.
Okay. I was just curious.
All we know is that they help. So they are recruiting peasants, they're taking part in the torture, the cleanup, and obviously too the killing. So a lot of people are kind of like, well, what's the reason for this, right? Like, is she just absolutely unhinged? Or is Anna actually a witch, right? So going back to the beginning of this, Elizabeth learns at a young age that blood helps your health.
Correct.
While this part's not entirely proven why they killed so many people, a lot of people think there was witchcraft behind it. So some of the rumors are that Anna would actually drain the virgin girl servants of their blood.
They have to be virgins?
Of course they had to be virgins.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth is rumored to use this to help keep her healthy, to provide her beautiful looks, and slow down her aging.
I'm just curious, do you know at that time what the average age was? Or lifespan?
It's not very old. Like, her at 44 is doing pretty good.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
I want to say 40s and 50s.
That's kind of what I was thinking. So maybe it's working.
Right. So she's draining the girls of this blood, so it's kind of known that Elizabeth is ingesting it. Sometimes to take it even a step further is to collect so much blood that she would bathe in the blood of her victims as part of her, self-care days, health rituals.
Sounds legit.
Worse yet is she's also suspected to have partaken in cannibalism, including literally biting chunks of raw flesh off of some of her victims.
I mean, why wouldn't she?
I mean, she doesn't really seem to have a lot of, hard
morals?
Stops. Right. She just kind of goes for it. So there's a peasant shortage in this area.
Yeah, because she killed them all.
At this point, so in her 40s, they actually think her body count was into the 400s.
Dang.
Word spreads about the violence being carried about by Elizabeth and her crew, and peasants really weren't even allowed to bring charges against noble families at this point. There's the word noble, take a drink.
Shot.
So Elizabeth was basically untouchable, right? People were powerless to stop her, and, she kind of uses up all the peasants However, she hits kind of a rough spot in life, right? She's out of workers. She begins to struggle with finances, likely because instead of taking care of the estates, she's just cutting off fingers. And without her husband, she's suffering from loneliness and depression.
I mean, she could have just like kept all these peasants as friends.
She could have, however, she didn't, and it gets worse yet. So she now has huge amounts of debt, basically on the verge of going broke. And Anna comes up with this wonderful idea.
Okay, I'm so sorry. You might have already said this, but where did Anna actually come from? She just met her one day?
They just met.
Okay.
They became old friends quickly.
Okay.
I mean, Anna's a witch, and she winds up with a torturer. They were made in heaven. Come on.
Right.
Well, probably not heaven. More like made in hell. Anna gets in her head and tells her, hey, my witchy, insight tells me or whatever, that if you start to kill the noble women, that her luck and her finances would turn around. So thus, her finishing school is born.
Of course.
She opens up this school where people can come to learn about etiquette and learn how to take care of a castle and estates. And Elizabeth and the crew start to recruit other young women from prominent families to come to the castle. And families, it turned out, paid her insane amounts of money to send girls to this school.
I mean, obviously, like, word doesn't travel the way it does now. Duh. But I just find it so weird that 400 deaths we are going off of are caused from her. So that means at least 400 times this woman has said that her servants have died of this, that, the other thing. And everybody was just like, cool. We have nobody else to work in this village now, but we should send our daughters there.
So they're kind of coming from far away. So remember, she's a prominent family of the whole country, but where she was pulling the peasants from was like her area.
Little village. Okay. It's just so weird.
There's rumors, but really not a whole lot of anything substantial, right?
Okay.
So the school's up and running. They're recruiting women. However, they're quickly tortured, killed, and thrown over the walls of the castle and fed to wolves.
Oh my God.
Now, as Elizabeth is explaining this to the families, she's using excuses like, well, one of the other girls kind of became unhinged at the school and killed these few. She came up with just wild tales about how the other families weren't raising their kids right.
This woman is brutal.
So they're not, raising their kids right. They're coming here. They're killing each other. And she's just trying to keep the peace.
But somehow she's okay.
Well, this is when the other families are like, we're not buying this. Elizabeth draws way too much attention. The killing of nobles ends up being a terrible idea because the families didn't let up on the disappearances like the peasant families would.
Right.
Basically, enough families start to complain that it's brought to the attention of the king of Hungary at the time. So not her uncle, but like the king of Hungary where this castle is. Which is Transylvania. It's now Transylvania is part Hungary, part Slovakia. The king appoints one of his most trusted representatives, Gregorio Thurzo, who is actually a close friend of Ferenc, and goes on record saying that on his deathbed, Ferenc actually tells this man, you need to watch out for my wife.
My wife is insane.
Like when the guy who's described as being brutal on the battlefield is like, my wife's worse, you got issues.
Oh my God. But here's the thing. I feel like, he wasn't a good guy, but being brutal on a battlefield when you're in war is a completely different thing than just freaking torturing people just because you saw them.
Right. So Thurzo, he starts talking to the victims' families, starts talking to the servants who made it out alive, and anybody close to Elizabeth that he could get his hands on. However, none were actually eyewitnesses to the murders. Or at least if the servants were, they weren't about to say anything.
Or they were already dead.
So Thurzo goes, you know what, I'm just going right to the source. So he starts to talk to Elizabeth's relatives, and not one of them actually argued for her innocence, but nobody would say that she did anything. So people are like, well, I'm not saying she didn't murder, right? Like they're just kind of being a little coy about
really
it.
Vague.
So the year is 1610, and Thurzo and the king get Elizabeth to invite them to the castle, right? So Elizabeth, she's kind of on guard now at this point in her life, and she wants to make this all go away. So she says, okay, they can come in. We're going to have a dinner.
She's going to schmooze them.
Not quite.
Oh, she's going to kill them.
So things are going great at first, and then a lovely cake is served to the guests.
Shut the hell up. This woman.
And Thurzo and the king immediately get sick.
Okay, hold on. You and I are trying to get this woman to admit that she's killed 400 plus people. We're going to her house, her castle. Are you going to eat anything this woman serves?
So it's not really that, right? They're like, we can't get anything on her. We just want to come visit. So they're not even there like to investigate.
Sure.
Right?
Are you going to eat anything this woman
Well, the
serves?
cake looked good. So anyways, they get immediately sick. They're now convinced that Elizabeth has tried to poison and kill them for looking into her. So they leave. Apparently, whatever she used, it was too quick acting because they didn't have enough for fateful effects, right?
They're just like shitting their pants. We gotta go.
Right. Thurzo later comes back to the castle, this time with a small army. Upon entering the castle, they find 2 murdered women in the hallway and could hear literal screams coming from what turns out to be the torture chamber.
Oh, God.
So, like, when you say caught red-handed, I mean, this woman's basically, at this point, caught red-handed.
I'm sorry, but I love the audacity of this woman.
She was insane. She thought she could get away with anything. So kind of roundabout this whole time, this army shows up. Anna's like, peace, I'm gonna have a stroke.
I was just gonna say, where is Anna when all of this is going on?
Well, a little bit before the army shows up, but like kind of after the dinner, she has a stroke. She's dead.
Has a stroke, eh?
Well, she's not gonna touch her. That's like her ritualist. Okay, so she was probably the safest one.
Maybe.
So she's taken into custody, and then in true Elizabeth Bathory fashion, she blames everything on the servants who were working for her. So we got Dorca, we got Catelyn, and we got the young man.
Oh, I forgot about them.
However, over 300 people show up to testify against Elizabeth, even her closest friends who assisted in the murders. These 3 turn on her.
I find it remarkable that she had so many people that were just willing to torture and kill people with her.
I honestly think, at least probably in like Dorca and Catelyn's situation, it's literally kill or be killed.
Yeah.
It's found that her and her cohort, like, records aren't great, right? A lot of these are estimated, but anywhere from 80 to 650 young women.
Oh my God.
Most of her accomplices, so there's other accomplices as well, but most of them are basically put to death, of course, after being tortured themselves. Catelyn is the only one who wasn't tortured before she was put to death, because many of the servants actually testified that when she wasn't torturing them, she was actually bringing them food and trying to take care of them. So I think she was
she probably felt really awful. She was just trying to survive.
So 300 people come out to testify against Elizabeth.
That's wild.
Due to her noble position, she is never brought on any charges. Oh. However, the king would not allow her to ever leave the castle again. So she's never formally charged, but she's also locked up into Castle Chititza for the rest of her days.
I mean, well, she loved that place, so...
The reason she's not brought up on charges is it turns out that before she lost all her money, her family had actually forgiven or paid off many of the king's debt.
Mm.
In her own torturous castle, in a cold, dark room, is where Elizabeth eventually perishes. She's in her late 40s. Before she perishes, Thurzo comes to her in her captivity, and this part kind of gives me chills, but he says this to her. You are in the last months of your life. You do not deserve to breathe the air on the earth or see the lights of the Lord. You shall disappear from this world and shall never reappear in it again. As the shadows envelop you, may you find the time to repent your bestial life.
Damn.
Elizabeth's buried at the castle. Later, her body is moved to the family crypts. This is the eeriest part for me. So he says, may you never reappear again. In the 1900s, the crypt is excavated. And where Elizabeth's body should be
is not.
There's no body. So this was in 1995.
What? What did they think? What are theories on that? Or they don't really have any?
Nobody knows. So the castle itself falls into ruins after it's burnt down and destroyed years after her death in another war. You can actually go and visit the place still and walk through parts of it. She's actually said to be one of the most prolific killers in all of history and may have the highest body count of any serial killer. Up to 650.
50.
So I guess, what do you think? Like, do you think they were a crew of, like, murder witches? Was Elizabeth a vampire or just, like, some crazy killer?
Okay, this is a lot. I think childhood trauma is real. I think she had a lot of childhood trauma, especially if you're a child and you're potentially thinking that you're going to die at any moment with all your health issues in that time. There's a lot of death for health all over the place. So I can't imagine you being a small child and being like sickly, not thinking that you're not going to die. You're seeing all this death. I guess like the blood thing, being told that that's going to cure you or help you survive. I mean,
well, the wild part is in any of the research that I did after that, they never mentioned the seizures again after childhood.
Right. And like I asked you prior, like how she lived a pretty old age for that time. So I'm not saying I go drink somebody's blood, but hey.
But you're also not saying she's not a vampire.
Right. But I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could just be like that childhood trauma and that weird, like, and then you get somebody that's witchcrafty and all that kind of stuff and is also attesting to what you've thought your whole life. But I don't know. That seems just strange to me because I guess it's like you could believe that and you could still just be getting blood from healthy people without torturing them. That's, I guess, where I get a little bit tripped up. It's like...
Well, she did see that man get sewn into the horse, remember? So that started a whole... I mean, she's just absolutely insane. Whether, and like the numbers, whether she killed 80 or 650, or in whether, there's some of the rumors are the blood rituals weren't even true. All that aside, she's still absolutely just an unhinged human in a powerful position.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I just kind of want to know more about Anna. Like, where the hell did she come from? Like, what was her... Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just so strange to me that you just find somebody. Like, how do you just have a conversation about that? Like, hey, I like to torture people. Oh my God, me too.
I mean, at some point, like... those energies have to be drawn to each other.
That's what I mean. Like, I feel like, where did she come from? Was she just like drawn to go to this place and be friends with her? Ugh, I don't like it. I hate it.
I can't say that I loved it either, and I kind of hate her, but that is the story of the Blood Countess.
That was a lot. That was a really good job, though.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot to take in. Hey, if anybody else has theories or ideas on whether she was a murderer or a vampire or anything else, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we would. And let us know how many shots you took. Okay, bye.
But in case anybody else is still drinking, noble, enjoy your night.
Bye.
Bye.